he's not only been our High Commissioner, earlier he was also Deputy High Commissioner. What is even more important is that he has continued his scholarly pursuits and lately published a book which is very appropriately titled as India's Pakistan Conundrum. Indeed, it's a conundrum. It's a puzzle how to resolve the problem. India is several times the size of Pakistan. Its population is much greater. Its GDP, according to the World Bank, is almost in 2020 was almost 10 times that of Pakistan. We have a much larger army. In fact, we are the third largest spender on defense, according to certain estimates in the world. So there is no match between India and Pakistan, and many people in the armed forces are of the view that there is no need for us to be friends with Pakistan. We can do without it. Why should we bother about Pakistan? But we are both nuclear armed. Kashmir continues to be the world's most militarized territory. There are always problems between the two countries, and many statesmen-like people view the relationship between the two with some concern, because they feel that if we can be friendly, then India can achieve its great power status much more quickly. An unstable Pakistan infested with terrorists is not at all in the long-term interest of India. Also, the nexus between China and Pakistan is an additional source of concern. So, to discuss these issues and to hear the views of Ambassador Sabharwal is a big treat for us. So we are indeed greatly privileged. And I would request our President, Shri Arun Kumar, to introduce the speaker today, Ambassador Sabharwal. And we look forward to a very, very interesting talk and perhaps a discussion thereafter. Sir, please take over.
Thanks, Naren. Friends, it is my pleasure to welcome today a diplomat and author, Shri Sharat Sabharwal, to Jigyasa, a forum of our association. Sharat sir, very hearty welcome to you.
Thank you.
Shri Sabharwal joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1975. He served in various positions in the permanent missions of India to the United Nations in Geneva and the Indian missions in Madagascar, France, and Mauritius. He also served as Director and Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs from 1990 to 1995. From 1995 to 1999, Shri Sabharwal held the post of Deputy High Commissioner of India in Pakistan, and from 1999 to 2002, he held the post of Deputy Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations in Geneva. He was the Ambassador of India to Uzbekistan from 2002 to 2005, and Additional Secretary and Special Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs from 2005 to 2009. With various other jobs in the ministry, he supervised the initiation of the Passport Seva project. While in the Foreign Service, Shri Sabharwal was the deputy member of Indian delegations to the United Nations General Assembly, the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, International Labour Conference, and World Health Assembly. He was also the deputy leader of the Indian delegation to the International Conference of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, held in Geneva in October 1999. Shri Sabharwal was a member of the Indian delegation to the World Conference Against Racism, held in Durban in September 2001. Shri Sabharwal was the High Commissioner of India to Pakistan for 4 years from April 2009 to 2013. He was appointed Central Information Commissioner in November 2013 and served in this position till September 2017. He is a distinguished visiting fellow at the Ananta Center, New Delhi. Shri Sabharwal has authored India's Pakistan Conundrum, Managing a Complex Relationship, and the book has been very well received. He has also been writing on foreign policy issues and participating in TV discussions. As we know, India's relationship with Pakistan has been full of conflicts, war, and lack of trust. We are looking forward to hear Shri Sabharwal on this very complex relationship with Pakistan. Shri Sabharwal.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for those words of introduction. And thank you indeed for giving me the privilege of speaking to this very distinguished group. Now, I have been asked to speak on Can India and Pakistan Ever Be Friends? What I'll do is I'll try and link it to the analysis of the Pakistani state and the India-Pakistan relationship in my book, India's Pakistan Conundrum, which has been published and released about 4 or 5 months ago by Routledge. And then come back to this question towards the end. I believe I have about at least 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes. And I'll try and wind up what I have to say in that time. Now, my starting point is that Pakistan, as we all know, is on the brink, as it has been many times before. And as I say, it will continue to be periodically until it resolves its dysfunction. This is not something which is new. This is not something which is going to end with the ongoing crisis. Also, as it was said earlier, a vast gap has emerged between India and Pakistan over the years. India's economy is now 10 times the size of Pakistan's economy. India's prestige has grown on the international stage. Pakistan's reputation has plummeted as a hotbed of terrorism, as a state which is perennially in a state of crisis. And also, in most social indicators, Pakistan now lags behind us. And yet Pakistan, in spite of all this, continues to loom large on our relationship for various reasons, but now increasingly more as a threat in conjunction with China. I think that's one important factor at this stage. And secondly, also consider this. Pakistan has been a very troublesome state for us. There's no doubt about it, no two opinions about it. And yet, if Pakistan were ever to go into a state of meltdown, that will be no less troublesome for us either. Because in that case, the resulting chaos and disorder in Pakistan will not leave us untouched. And in that case, we will face a sea of Islamic extremism, unbridled Islamic extremism, beginning with Afghanistan right up to our border. And the consequences will be serious for us also. Now, that's indeed the dilemma and the kind of dangers that we face from our Western side. So therefore, naturally, there has been an intense debate in India on how to deal with Pakistan, which has oscillated between two extremes. At the one end is a view held by people, and that's a waning constituency, which felt that the strategic, that the shared heritage of the two countries and the people-to-people bonhomie, which we see in third countries when Indians and Pakistanis meet, they get along very well, that would take care of all problems of India and Pakistan. That was a slightly, I call it a romantic view, but not without its merit, because this people-to-people bonhomie, people-to-people relationship does play a role, and we must keep that in mind. At the other end is a increasingly popular, purely militaristic view, which says we can take care of this problem purely through military means. And then, of course, there are a number of options lying in between. Now, three things, according to me, have happened in the course of this debate. First, a number of misperceptions have crept into our debate, resulting no doubt from the justified anger of our people at Pakistan's conduct over the years. You think of a problem in anger, you're sometimes likely to draw wrong conclusions. Two, the circumstances of creation of Pakistan continue to weigh on this relationship. There is a constituency on the other side which continues to believe in the thoroughly discredited two-nation theory. And there is a section of opinion in India which continues to nurse a sense of loss in creation of Pakistan, and that someday, this could be undone. And third, of course, our politics on the issue also colors our judgment at times. But those are the three things that have happened. So in writing my book, my aim was to make an objective assessment of the ground reality, to address some of those misperceptions, to assess India's policy options, their potential and their limitations, and suggest a way forward. And some of the conclusions, I have drawn a number of conclusions in my book. Some of the conclusions which I'm going to mention today are counterintuitive to the Indian mind. You wish things were otherwise, but I believe that it's important for us to recognize the ground reality, to accept it, rather than living with false assumptions, especially when it comes to a fraught relationship like India's with Pakistan. I have divided my book into two parts, and this is all relevant to the question that was posed at the beginning: can they ever be friends? The first is about the nature of the Pakistani state. I have examined four factors in particular in that part. I won't go into details because of the time at our disposal, but I'll briefly touch upon each one of them. And those factors are civil-military imbalance. And this is a well-known thing in India. I don't have to say much on that. Pakistan has been ruled directly by the army for 33 years. And even when they haven't been ruling directly, they have controlled things from behind the scenes, especially foreign policy and security policy of Pakistan, and anything else in which they wish to take an interest in. During Imran Khan Bajwa era, a system was introduced which was called a hybrid system within ports, which means both sides had an open share in power. This was an open secret, although the army had an upper hand all along until they fell apart, and the rest is very well known to you. Now, the stranglehold of the army on Pakistan continues, and there is no indication that this situation is going to change anytime soon. That has a consequence for India-Pakistan relationship, because although at the beginning Pakistan bereft of a positive identity, adopted an adversarial posture towards India and continued to regard itself as the antithesis of India. Now that posture was perpetuated by the army over the years. They have an institutional interest in sustaining the India bogey, in maintaining low-level tensions with India, which suits their institutional interest of keeping a tight hold on the Pakistani polity and justifying their prime position in the Pakistani polity. And that is one factor which weighs heavily on this relationship. Second is rampant religious extremism and their ready access to weapons, especially after the Afghan jihad. Pakistan was created on the basis of religion as a homeland for Muslims of South Asia. Although that theory, as I said, was discredited right in the beginning because many decided to stay back in India, many Muslims. And then, of course, the creation of Bangladesh then completely buried it. Although the older generation, I must say, in Pakistan continues to cling to it closely, not the younger so much. When I spoke to younger audiences, they were more forward-looking, talking of scholarships, talking of why can't we travel, etc., exchanges amongst universities, etc., and so on. But so it was created on the basis of religion. And then 1949, the Pakistani Constituent Assembly adopted an objectives resolution, which in essence said that Pakistan would be governed according to the teachings of Holy Quran and Sunnah. moving forward, the question arose which school or belief system of Islam was going to govern Pakistan. Now that has caused a lot of misery and violence in Pakistan. First, the Ahmadiyas were thrown out of the Muslim fold 1974 through a constitutional amendment. Then the traditional Shia-Sunni divide was accentuated after Iranian Revolution, and with both Saudi Arabia and Iran trying to win the loyalties of Muslims around the globe. And then as things move forward, within the Sunni fold, the Deobandis and Barelvis fell apart. And a lot of violence amongst these groups, a lot of killing of Muslims in this homeland of Muslims, that is called Pakistan. Now, all these groups have been used one time or the other, both by the civilian leaders and the army, to serve their interests within Pakistan in political context, etc., and when the army wished to intervene in internal matters, as also to perpetrate terrorism against India and in Afghanistan to control things and to keep a foothold in Afghanistan. So that also is an angle which weighs on the relationship. Then terrorism, which is a well-known, after that, serious ethnic fault lines. Now, Punjab has a predominant position, both in terms of population, the share in power at the federal level, share in the economy, etc., etc. All that has meant resentment amongst the smaller provinces, which has shown itself more seriously. In the case of Sindh, it was subsumed by the success of PPP at the federal level. But the ethnic fault lines have shown themselves up more seriously in the case of Balochistan and the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the tribal belt of Pakistan. Balochistan has seen 5 insurgencies. The 5th insurgency has gone on and on there. But the problem is that Balochistan has 44% of Pakistan's territory, but only 6% of Pakistan's population. Out of that, only about 55% are Baloch. The rest are Pashtuns in the areas abutting Afghanistan and people from other provinces. So because of this sparse population, it has been possible for the authorities to exercise strong arm tactics to control the situation, keep it a little suppressed, although Balochistan will continue to simmer. The problem is much more serious on the other side in the tribal belt because of the Pashtun pull from the other side of the Durand line. Please note that no Afghan government, not even the Taliban, who were created and supported by Pakistan, have accepted Durand line as the border between the two countries. So this is a much more serious situation there. Their share in population is also more, about 17%. They also have about 15 to 20% share in the armed forces. So the third fault line. Then living beyond its means, this is something which you are seeing at the moment. Pakistan's resource mobilization is very low, but expenses are extremely high, especially on defense and now increasingly on debt servicing. So for the last few years, year after year, the situation has been that the government, federal government, after parting with the share of the provinces, is left with money which is not enough even to pay for defense and debt servicing. So the rest of the functioning of the government is financed through borrowing. That's a very serious situation and not sustainable. Pakistan's defense budget has been 6 to 7% open budget, declared budget over some years of its history. It's about 3% now, declared budget. But much more money is believed to be spent off the budget books, and especially, earned from the business empire of the armed forces, etc., etc. Now, this has brought Pakistan to the situation that they are facing today, on the verge of a default. They'll probably scrape through. They may scrape through, but even if they do that, they will keep on coming back to this situation time and again until they resolve their dysfunctionality and stop living beyond their means. So I draw 3 conclusions based on the overall examination of the nature of the Pakistani state in my book. First, and this is a misperception, that Pakistan is about to fall apart. It's about to disintegrate. My conclusion is that's not on the cards. It's not about to disintegrate. Although it has and it will continue to have large areas of lawlessness, especially in Balochistan and the tribal belt. And it may interest you to know that the hardliners in Pakistan, when I talked to them, especially in the 90s when I was there as Deputy High Commissioner, not so much when I was High Commissioner, were of the view that India was going to fall apart. They would talk of some 17 insurgencies and so on, and some hardliners continue to hold that view even today. So that's the first conclusion. The second, Pakistan is not a failed state, not yet. It's not a Somalia, it's not an Afghanistan. It has a reasonably functioning system of administration, though it has many fault lines and those areas of lawlessness. That is a reality. The most difficult thing for Pakistan is that it's a highly dysfunctional state. Highly dysfunctional state because of those four factors which I mentioned earlier. And it is my conclusion that that dysfunctionality is not going to resolve itself anytime soon, and because the factors underlying it, those four factors especially, are immutable in the foreseeable future. So this dysfunctionality will continue, and that has an impact on Pakistan's relationship with India. In part 2 of my book, I deal with some key issues of the relationship and India's policy options. First, Jammu and Kashmir. 4 broad conclusions I have drawn. The first is that the only feasible peaceful solution to this problem is a non-territorial solution, which means freezing the existing ground reality. Although I recognize that it would be difficult both for Pakistan, even for India, to carry through that kind of solution because of the positions we have taken over the years. And now China also casts a heavy shadow on this issue because of its deep involvement in the areas of the state of Jammu and Kashmir illegally occupied by Pakistan, especially the so-called Gilgit-Baltistan. In this context, I also examined the understandings which were arrived at in a back-channel discussions during the Musharraf era, roughly from 2004 to 2007, which were not a final settlement of the Kashmir issue, but which, if carried forward, had the potential to move us towards a non-territorial solution. There were 4 basic understandings from what is known. One was trade and travel across the line of control between the 2 parts of Kashmir. Now, this was introduced in 2005 and 2008 in a staggered manner. It continued till about 2019 when it fell by the wayside because of the deteriorating relationship. Second element was thinning of forces, especially from the residential areas as security situation improved. Third was self-governance for internal management in equal measure on both sides of the line of control, which means whatever applied to this side in terms of autonomy would apply to the other side also, including Baltistan. And fourth was a joint consultative mechanism composed of representatives from both sides to discuss issues of socio-economic development, not anything related to security or sovereignty. So there was no concept of joint management in it. There was no concept of joint sovereignty. Of course, it couldn't be taken forward because Musharraf lost power before he could do it. The successor civilian governments didn't have the political capital or the backing of the army under Musharraf's successors to carry it forward. My second conclusion on Kashmir is that Kashmir does not resonate with the Pakistani people as it might have at one time. Kashmir and the India relationship have not been an issue of any consequence in Pakistani elections, the last 3 elections, 2008, 2013, and 2018. No politician in Pakistan can win an election on the plank of Kashmir. In my last meeting with Nawaz Sharif in June 2013, when he had been Prime Minister for the 3rd time only for about 3 weeks and I was leaving Pakistan, he told me कि देखिए जी मैंने कितनी बात की कि इंडिया के साथ रिलेशनशिप इंप्रूव करना है इलेक्शन कैंपेन में. He said कि मेरे सीनियर लीडर आए मेरे पास, उन्होंने कहा कि आप क्या कर रहे हैं, इससे वोट जाती रहेगी. He said जी कोई वोट नहीं गई मेरी. And then he was silent for a few seconds, and he smiled and he said कि उसकी वजह से कुछ वोट मुझे लगता मेरी तरफ आ गए. Kashmir is an issue which is kept alive by the Pakistani establishment and its ecosystem. One, as a stick to beat India with, B, to bleed us in the valley. That's the reality today. For people, day to day, it's their bread and butter issues in which they are interested. Third, our Article 370 move did not put an end to the Kashmir dimension, to the Pakistan dimension of our Kashmir problem. Pakistan's questioning of the accession of Jammu and Kashmir preceded the introduction of Article 370, and it has outlasted its abrogation. So that dimension remains alive, and we have to deal with it one way or the other. And lastly, I make the obvious point that to the extent that you can resolve the internal dimension of the problem, it will lessen the chances for Pakistan to fish in troubled waters. Next, I come to terrorism. I examined three phases in the last 30 years or so. First was a brazen phase. This was after the Soviets left Afghanistan in late 80s. Pakistan was triumphant. They thought they had driven a superpower out of Afghanistan, that they could coerce India into making concessions on Kashmir through the instrumentality of terror, etc. It was brazen. There was nothing to hide about it. Lashkar-e-Toiba and others, the Tanzeems operated openly, collecting money in Pakistan, etc., etc. To give you an example, we had talks on Kashmir in 1998, October, in Islamabad. Indian Foreign Secretary K. Raghunath, he made the Indian presentation. In that, he talked of Lashkar-e-Toiba and terrorist groups from Pakistan perpetrating terrorism in Kashmir. And when the turn came of the Pakistani Foreign Secretary Shamshad Ahmad, and he came to this issue, he talked one by one of what Raghunath had said. He comes to this issue and he says, Excellency, you talked of some terror groups. I don't forget the name. Lashkar-e-Toiba was a household name those days. He said, forget the name. And he feigned that he was consulting his notebook and he said, yes, you talked of something called Lashkar-e-Toiba. Excellency, we looked Raghunath in the eye. He said, Excellency, we don't know this group. It may be a charitable organization which is carrying out some charity, but there's no question of any terrorism. That was the phase. Second phase came good terrorists and bad terrorists after 9/11, when the Americans threatened to bomb Pakistan back to the Stone Age. So they made a half-hearted U-turn, became a frontline state in the war on terror, while at the same time continuing to harbor terrorists, including the Taliban. And we know that they eventually secured a victory in Afghanistan in August 2021. Third was the recent phase under the shadow of Financial Action Task Force, in which we have taken action against some terrorists, prosecuted them, sentenced them to imprisonment, etc. We don't know how genuine that imprisonment is, but some action has been taken, and it has imposed some check on Pakistan's terror machine. My conclusion is that while Pakistani terror may have gone down because of Pakistan's internal preoccupations, problems on the Afghanistan front, but it could go up again and we need to be prepared for it. It's like turning down a tap, you can turn it on again. In terrorism, I also explain how Pakistan systematically sabotaged the Mumbai trial, particularly 2015 onwards. After admitting in 2009, I was High Commissioner then, for the first and the last time, that a terror attack in India was perpetrated from the Pakistani soil. They gave us a very detailed dossier, which I describe in my book, on how the conspiracy was hatched by Lashkar-e-Toiba, terrorist trained, launched from the Pakistani coast, etc., the evidence they had collected. But in spite of this, later on sabotaged it because the security establishment was not cooperating. I have also spoken of trade as a game changer. Now, I am opposed to linking trade to political issues, simply because trade, whatever its volume, brings economic opportunities to people on both sides, A. B, if it grows beyond a point, it also has the potential to create constituencies with an economic stake in peace. 2013, a lot of work had been done on trade. We were close on, Pakistan giving us MFN, because Pakistan had moved briefly away from linking trade to political issues. There was an incident on the line of control and the peace process came to a halt. And I would like to tell you that the first persons to call me were prominent businessmen of Pakistan, whom I knew from Karachi and Lahore. And they said, High Commissioner, what is happening? We have invested a lot of money in carrying out market surveys and so on. So I said, you are addressing the wrong person. Go back to your own security establishment. That was a nascent sign of the kind of constituencies that trade can create. Of course, we had given MFN status to Pakistan in 1996, which they hadn't reciprocated. After Pulwama, we withdrew the MFN status and increased customs duty by 200% on Pakistani imports to India. Now, that was a retaliatory move. Pakistan's exports to India were about $400 million at that stage, less than 2% of their global exports. That move might have hurt some individual exporters from Pakistan who were sending items to India, but it did not have the potential to change the calculus of Pakistan's security establishment. It's a simple fact, less than 2%, they can live with it. Then, of course, Pakistan took an even more short-sighted step after India withdrew the special status of Jammu and Kashmir through suspension of trade, which hurts the Pakistani economy much more than it hurts the Indian economy. Then we talk of, in our strategic community, of water as an instrument of coercion. Many of our strategists have said, you stop Pakistan's water, and they will come down to their knees within days. I believe this is a highly overblown option. You might have heard India has asked for amendment of the Indus Waters Treaty. Under the Indus Waters Treaty, Pakistan has been allotted 3 rivers, Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. Ravi, Bias, and Satluj have been allotted entirely to India, but India is allowed some use on the waters of Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. The fact is that we haven't utilized even our own share of water from all these rivers till today, much less build the costly and difficult infrastructure through mountainous terrain to bring that water to the water-starved Indian plains. So even if you were to withdraw from the treaty and live with the legal consequences, look, the treaty does not allow for unilateral withdrawal by India. It has to be a mutual agreement. But even if we decide to brazen it out as an influential country, etc., water will continue to flow to Pakistan until you build that infrastructure. So this option, when it's spoken of, it's a highly overblown option. I'm saying all this because these are all misperceptions, and they then color our judgment about how we can deal with Pakistan. Then military coercion. I don't wish to go into too many details. It is my conclusion that while the nuclear dimension of the conflict has not eliminated altogether the possibility for India to use military means to punish Pakistan, it has imposed a serious limitation on India's ability to coerce Pakistan purely through military means by giving it a crushing military blow. When you go to a conflict at that level to give Pakistan a crushing military blow, something on the scale of Bangladesh or even more serious, you bring the nuclear red lines into play. And our experts in TV studios, etc., can always talk of, ignoring Pakistan's nuclear threats, etc., etc. Our strategic experts will continue to look at ways and means of bypassing the nuclear dimension. We must continue to do so. But the bottom line is this. An elected prime minister sitting in South Block in Delhi has to take a decision to authorize a consequential military strike against Pakistan in the knowledge that this could by accident or by design go to the nuclear domain. And imagine the kind of difficult decision that would be. So my conclusion is, and what I would say is that purely military means cannot get us rid of this problem. It's a much more complex issue than that. We also say we'll isolate Pakistan. Isolate it to the extent that we'll, Pakistan will not be able to do anything. Pakistan has, ruined its reputation in a serious way itself. That's a fact. But I make a distinction between the Indian diplomacy mobilizing international opinion in favor of India in moments of crisis, post Pulwama, post Balakot strike, etc., etc. That's one thing we have done successfully. But it's quite another thing to isolate Pakistan to the extent of once again securing an enduring change in its view. I talk of an enduring change because you can secure a change for a short while through, for example, Balakot, etc., etc. Examine its relationship. Its relationship with China has deepened and broadened. It's a strategic relationship. Pakistan today is an exit for China to the Arabian Sea and beyond to the wider Indian Ocean, bypassing the choke points, the maritime choke points in the east, notably the Malacca Straits, which has been a big worry for China. So it's a very deep relationship. You cannot decouple them, but probably you can mitigate the impact of that relationship by managing the western border and keeping things calm as you can there, so that we can devote our attention to the Chinese side. With the US, the relationship has become transactional, equations have changed, but I don't see the US abandoning Pakistan anytime soon. They will keep on coming back. They'll maintain some kind of links because of Pakistan's geostrategic situation. Don't forget that Pakistan sits at the nexus of geopolitical interests of many countries, of China, of India, of Central Asia and beyond, of Iran, of the Persian Gulf, etc., and West Asia. So that's an important piece of real estate, and that will continue to count somewhere in the strategic calculus of the United States also. Going forward, I believe we need to make a distinction between the Pakistani establishment and the Pakistani people, adopt a more nuanced approach. I give some reasons in my book, but I'll run through 3-4 of them. First, there is a sizable constituency in Pakistan which believes that a stable relationship with India will be in its own interest. It's not that they have suddenly come to love India or anything. It's a realization that you need a stable relationship with India if they need to sustain their lifestyle, etc., etc. There's various constituencies, politicians who can win electoral power through elections, the Pakistani elite, the liberal sections of the society, sections of the academic community, and also large sections of Pakistan's business and industry. Second, the national discourse in Pakistan has become far more introspective than ever before. That's because because of the increasing sign of failure of Pakistan's old policies over the years, and B, because of the media revolution. Multiple TV channels, the social media, access to internet, etc., etc. So the information cannot be controlled by the security establishment as it was controlled earlier. Third, widespread realization, and this was palpable to me when I was High Commissioner in Pakistan, of the growing gap between the two countries, that you cannot bridge this gap. And that has an impact on whatever decisions eventually are taken by them. And lastly, unprecedented questioning of the army. You saw Imran Khan doing it, the most recent example, in a very serious manner when army was under Bajwa. Now, I must admit that all these trends are not capable today. They are not strong enough today to overcome the resistance of the old order. But we must not ignore those trends. We must keep a note of those trends, because these trends must grow if Pakistan is ever to become a sensible state. Even if they are weak today, they must grow. This voice must grow if Pakistan is to become a normal state. Very briefly on dialogue versus no dialogue. Every discussion last few years on India's Pakistan relationship boils down. It's a very lazy argument, you know. You boils down to भाई बात करने के नहीं बात करनी नहीं होनी चाहिए. क्या कर रहे हैं, क्या किया इन लोगों ने, क्यों बात करनी है इनसे? I don't think it's as simple as that. 4 points I will make very quickly. First of all, I don't believe dialogue per se is a concession to Pakistan. And dialogue need not result in a concession unless we decide to make one. It's a conscious decision. Dialogue by itself doesn't result in a concession. B, it's a fact that when we have not been talking directly, we have either talked through the guns And when guns have become too loud, it has brought the intervention of influential members of the international community, or we have talked through third countries who first serve their own interest. I have often said that the Americans have always leveraged India-Pakistan differences to serve their own interests in this region. And let me tell you, when things, the ceasefire unraveled 2016 onwards, post-Uri, that situation continued for almost 4 years until the ceasefire was restored in 4 or 5 years, restored in February 2021. How did it come about? It came about through dialogue, behind the scenes dialogue between our intelligence agencies brokered by the UAE. So that's the second point. Third, there is no evidence to suggest that when we are not talking with Pakistan, the terror activity goes down, or vice versa, that when we are talking, terror activity is low, etc., etc. Terror activity, the level depends upon many other factors. Pakistan's internal preoccupations, its preoccupation on the western border, and of course, its comfort level with the United States. Lastly, as a diplomat who has served long years in the Foreign Service, I find it difficult to accept the proposition that dialogue and diplomacy have no role to play in this relationship because it's a difficult relationship. That's not what diplomats do. Our training has been to continue trying, even if things are bad, continue to trying to see if you can calm them down to resolve problems for your country. Now, I would acknowledge readily that dialogue and diplomacy have not shown so far the potential to change the fundamentals of the relationship. The fundamentals remain intact, Pakistan's adversarial attitude, etc. But nor has the use of military means, pure military means, achieved that goal. But I believe that dialogue and diplomacy can play a secondary, though important role from our point of view of managing this relationship to keep the levels of volatility and violence low so that it does not distract us from more important tasks of economic transformation and dealing with a more dangerous threat in China. I'll wind up in 2 minutes. The last is way forward. And the question, can we ever be friends with Pakistan? My first conclusion is there is no silver bullet. TV studios would tell you, we have done surgical strikes, we've done Balakot, now things will be solved. You stop water, things. There's nothing of that kind. It has to be a combination of various instrumentalities. B, you cannot normalize your relationship fully with Pakistan until it remains a dysfunctional state. You cannot normalize your relationship fully with an abnormal state. That's a fact of life. We should accept it. But because you cannot normalize the relationship, of course, does not mean that you don't manage it. What were we doing earlier, for example, post-Mumbai, when the relationship got stabilized a little bit? Nobody had any illusions of a sudden big bang improvement in the relationship, but we were managing the relationship. So because you cannot normalize it completely does not mean you don't manage it to keep volatility and violence as low as possible, or leave it to a state of free fall, or leave it entirely to our security sector. So in the short run, in the foreseeable future, I believe the best we can do is to manage this relationship by combining deterrence with calibrated punitive approach when necessary, absolutely, but also dialogue and diplomacy, which should not be written off. While doing all this, we should keep an eye for opportunities that may arise. Maybe Pakistan, becomes more enlightened because of its problems. I don't have much hope here, there immediately, but that can happen. If those opportunities arise, then we must take them to move this relationship more positively, more firmly in a positive direction. I hope that answers that question to some extent. And I'll leave it here. It's a complex relationship. There are no easy black and white answers to the things that we face. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that may be asked.
I think you're muted. Sir, you're unmute. You have to, yeah, now.
Thank you very much, Sharatji, for a very incisive analysis of the whole thing. Of course, there must be very some person will be like to have raise some issues. So let us hear them discuss.
One of the things that is a problem is the kind of antagonistic populism. Both countries seem to have it. If you have an adversarial relationship, it seems to feed to a constituency and it promises electoral victories. And in democracies, whatever kind of democracy Pakistan has, certainly we are a functioning democracy. How do we address that issue? And one possible solution to this can be to discuss Pakistan. We have ceased to discuss Pakistan with the common people because we feel we seem to have managed the problem effectively. But nobody has an idea. I mean, common people don't seem to have a long-term perspective of this issue. And if there is much more discussion of this issue in various universities, in various fora, within our country and within Pakistan. And there is also much more interaction initially amongst the academics and strategic experts, but subsequently also in the more popular fora. Perhaps an awareness will grow of the need for some kind of a rapprochement between the two sides. This will also probably strengthen the peace constituency across the border. I don't know what your views in this matter are.
No, you are absolutely right. I mean, Pakistan was obsessed with India when I was Deputy High Commissioner there. But I must tell you, when I was High Commissioner, that obsession had gone down because they were so busy internally that they had no time to, very little time to discuss and indulge in India baiting, etc., etc. Surprisingly, as obsession with India and Pakistan has gone down, in India, obsession with Pakistan has gone up. As I said at the beginning, there is a vast gap that has emerged between the two countries. We haven't resolved the problem. That's a false assumption that we make. That problem will remain, but vast gap has emerged, and Pakistan is not the kind of threat it might have been earlier, except in conjunction with China. There's a lot of debate that takes place in our country on TV studios, etc., etc., but the debate is ill-informed. It's not a well-informed debate, and I entirely agree with you that if this issue were to be discussed in a more enlightened manner, in a more rational manner in the universities and amongst academics, etc., etc., you would have better results in terms of understanding on both sides. And there is no denying the fact that academic exchanges between the two countries can help. I saw them taking place during my two tenures, more during my tenure as High Commissioner. And may I say that this is one of the reasons I have written the book. My book, because all those misperceptions that are there, we have settled this problem now, Pakistan is left behind. That's assumption on the one side. On the other, there is an obsession with Pakistan. Every other turn you take, you see Pakistan there in our debate, public debate at least, on TV channels, in many of our media outlets, etc., etc. And I think that needs to be changed. If there is a discussion, it needs to be a more serious discussion.
Any?
Sir.
There is a university scholar, Sir Laduram Chaudhary. He wants to speak.
Yes.
He's researched civil-military relations, I suppose.
Yes.
Thank you, Sisodia Sahab, and thank you, Sabharwal Sahab. It's a wonderful talk, and it's a learning experience for me. I teach political science at University of Rajasthan, and I'm researching on the civil-military relations, especially the question of jointness in the Indian Armed Forces. And I'm currently visiting fellow at the Stimson Center. So as a part of visiting fellowship, I'm also looking at the South Asian dynamics, especially India-Pakistan relations. Sir, your arguments and conclusions are very, very enlightening in the sense that kind of environment that we see in the university. Because universities, students, young minds, they are so much of skeptical about, forget about having a good relationship with Pakistan. They have so much of hostility and animosity, like brought into their mind by the TV media, as you rightly pointed out. So my question is that how we can take this further, because government is actually not taking this further, because the suspension of dialogue is actually you know not doing anything. And in that sense, the kind of track to diplomacy that we earlier used to have, or kind of confidence building measures were established even before 1988 nuclear CBMs, even a decade before we become nuclear weapon states. So my one question is that what kind of institutions actually involved in this building the nuclear CBMs between India and Pakistan? Because we know very little, that only High Commissioner and Ministry of External Affairs exchanges list between two countries. How this list is being prepared, and if this is shared with the Pakistan, why not it be politicized and publicized with the Indian audience, so we can know betterly to build the trust. Thank you, sir.
No, this is first, about the list. Let me dispose it off. It's a list of our nuclear facilities, which are well known. They're well known, in India, where our nuclear reactors, etc., are. This is public information. We don't share any secret information with Pakistan, and it is in the context of agreement on non-attack on nuclear facilities of each other. So they give us the list of their facilities. We give our list to them. Nuclear CBMs, there used to be a group as part of the dialogue. There was a group on conventional CBMs, and there was a group on working group on nuclear CBMs. But of course, dialogue hasn't taken place since 2012 was the last round. So naturally, those groups have fallen by the wayside. And there is not much discussion on nuclear or conventional CBMs at this time. But you're absolutely right. I agree with you. And I often say that if there are threats from Pakistan, and I'm not denying that there are threats from Pakistan, I've spoken of them during my presentation. So long as Pakistan continues to threaten our security and our interests, deterrence and calibrated punitive approach will have to remain part of our strategy. We cannot do away with it. But diplomacy and dialogue also must have a role. If you do not wish to talk openly at times governments are shy of doing that. We have resorted to speaking behind the scenes. As I said, the restoration of ceasefire came as a result of dialogue behind the scenes brokered by the UAE between officials of our intelligence agencies. So dialogue and diplomacy have a role. The problem at the moment is we had a stance of terror and talks cannot go together, although I must say it wasn't followed very uniformly in the initial years. After all, the government continued contacts with Pakistan until Prime Minister went, and I think rightly so. I supported that move, made a short halt in Lahore for a few hours. We must have expected that there were some possibilities of moving things in a positive direction to lower this threat to some extent. But of course, then terror attacks followed and the relationship nosedived again. So we had that position. But now, since 2019, Pakistan has painted itself into a corner. We must admit that. Imran Khan, he had no effective answer to that move. So one of the things he said was India must withdraw this move. They are in a very fractious political climate at the moment, and no government has the courage to climb down from that position. So I don't expect much to happen till Pakistan's elections due in the fourth quarter of this year. Possibly then India will go into its election cycle till our elections of 2024. After that, there may be a possibility for a little rethink in Pakistan and perhaps on our side also. And it may be possible we went into the management mode. We had gone into a free fall mode post-Uri. We went into management mode again with the restoration of ceasefire, but we have not been able to build upon it. Building upon it would entail first and foremost to regain some of the things which were there in the past, which were lost. representation at High Commissioner's level, resume trade, etc., may be possible after 2024. We have to wait for some time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Yes, I'm hearing
Sir,
you.
sir, how do you view the prospects of further division of Pakistan? Balochistan's bowling, for example.
Well, my I think I mentioned it in my presentation also. Balochistan is going through fifth insurgency, and the bigger problem is in the Pashtun belt, which abuts Afghanistan. A bigger problem because of the Pashtun pull from the other side and non-recognition of the Durand line, etc., etc. Now, these two are the regions that have been in turmoil. But consider a few things. Number one, as far as Balochistan is concerned, it's a very sparsely populated place, as I told you. Only 6% of population of Pakistan, out of which only 55% about thereabouts are Baloch. The rest are Pakhtuns and people from other provinces, etc. So it's only in a small population that there has been a resentment, and government has been able to control it through strong arm tactics. I haven't seen also an appetite in any other influential member of the international community in the Western countries, etc., to see this nuclear-armed, dangerous state fall apart and go into a meltdown. So that, I think, also needs to be taken into account when we speak of Balochistan. Although, as I said, Balochistan will continue to simmer. So will Pakistan's Pashtun belt, because of mistakes made by them over the years, radicalization of this belt for the Afghan jihad, etc., etc. This will also continue to simmer and pose serious headaches for Pakistan. My own assessment is that Pakistan should be able to, the chances of change in the external boundaries of Pakistan, let me put it that way, the chances of change in external boundaries of Pakistan will remain low in the foreseeable future. Although within that boundary, it will continue to have large areas of lawlessness as it has today, both in Balochistan and in the Pashtun belt.
Bhanavaji.
Rajendra, you are muted, I think.
Can't. Yeah, now I've been able to unmute myself. Yes. Sharaji, you have very rightly said that there is an increase in obsession, Pakistan obsession in India over the years, and there has been a reduction in the India obsession in Pakistan. But do you think the reason for this is the ideological leaning of the dispensation in power at this point of time for the last around 8 or 9 years? Has it to do something with this? Because people still do not have that Pakistan obsession, but it is being generated, it is being created. So do you link it with the establishment or the dispensation in power triggered obsession with Pakistan? And is it in the interest of the country, both countries? That's one thing which comes to my mind.
Let me put it this way. We had a broad consensus on Pakistan policy of India for a long time, from 1947 down to recent years, let's say about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. Broad consensus. There were differences, of course, from time to time. On Indus Waters Treaty, there was a lot of controversy when Nehru signed it in 1960, but broad consensus. That has broken down. And that makes the life of diplomats extremely difficult. Let me give you a few examples. When I was High Commissioner, we couldn't take a single step without someone or the other describing it as biryani diplomacy. Every little move led to a huge controversy within India, political controversy. And it was difficult for diplomacy. There was no room for maneuver there. Fast forward to, I refer to Prime Minister Modi's visit, short halt in Lahore. As a diplomat, I believe, someone who studies India-Pakistan relationship, that was the right thing to do, because he must have expected some a possibility of moving forward along with Nawaz Sharif. And I haven't spoken much of Nawaz Sharif during my presentation, but he, over the years, has learned his lessons, and I think he wants a better relationship, stable relationship with India to undercut the salience of the army within the Pakistani polity, amongst other reasons. So Prime Minister did the right thing, but he came in for a lot of criticism. I think the other aspect which you are talking of, you're absolutely right. I mean, it comes as part of, handy as part of, certain discussions on ideological issues and so on. One point which I made in my book, but I didn't raise it here, as I forgot to mention this, is that according to me, the most dangerous threat from Pakistan to us has been and continues to be its divisive and exclusionary ideology. That is the most dangerous threat to us from Pakistan. And in my view, India's tradition of managing our diversity in a democratic manner is the strongest and the best antidote to that threat, which we have used over the years, which will come in handy to us now. I think Pakistan's experience of what they have done, homeland of Muslims, and then kept on dividing it, Ahmadiyya has gone, Shia, Sunni, Deobandi, Barelvi, etc., etc. That's a lesson for all multi-religious and multi-ethnic states.
Okay. Sohan Maria ji.
Yes. Good morning, sir.
Morning,
That is really a very informative deliberation by Sabharwal, sir. My question now, it raised that if the ideology is the basic feature of the Pakistan, then there must be in India it is countering the process of ideology or not. In plenty of decade we are seeing that by the process of ideology can we beat the system of Pakistan, or can we counter the Pakistan? First thing is that now my other question is that to maintain the viability of its long standing nuclear doctrine of minimum credible deterrence, that is cognitive dissonance that is reflected in a pursuit of contradictory policies, sir. My question is that by digital, in the era of digital and soft diplomacy, where the Joseph Nye said that the best propaganda is not propaganda, then how can we say that the ideology by the way of ideology it can be countered, or in by the soft diplomacy process, how can we balance these two triads or these features? Thank you, sir.
Well, as a diplomat, as an ex-diplomat, I would wish that ideology and politics is kept out of all these sensitive issues. I wish that were possible. That is not possible in an ideal, a world which is far from ideal. It's an ideal which cannot be achieved. In a democracy, some views will come up, ideological views, etc., etc. But I believe too much of ideology and too much of electoral politics in these kind of issues then cramp our ability to maneuver our diplomacy or whatever options we have to deal with the situation. Again, I emphasize, I'm not underestimating the threat to us from Pakistan. I'm also saying continue to use the instrumentality of deterrence and punitive, calibrated punitive approach. But I'm also saying two things. One, do not give up diplomacy. Diplomats don't give up till a situation goes to a war. And we are not in a war situation yet, number one. Number two, what I'm saying is make a distinction between the Pakistani establishment and the people. I have told you the debate there is far more introspective. There's a large constituency which believes that a stable relationship with India will be in their own interest. It's their security establishment, the Pakistani establishment, which is driving the agenda because of which they pose a threat to us. We must continue to make a distinction between the two. When there are too many threatening voices emanating from India, that drives everyone in Pakistan into the arms of their security establishment. जब खतरा होता है, threat है, यहाँ से बहुत threatening आवाजें जा रही हैं, तो लोग कहते हैं फिर ये तो हमें यही सेव करेंगे आर्मी, फिर उनका एजेंडा एक्सेप्ट करते हैं, एक्सेप्टेंस ज्यादा हो जाती है। तो जितनी आइडियोलॉजी इन चीजों में कम रहे उतना मैं समझता हूँ ठीक है. Ideology is not an answer. As I said, Pakistan has set a very bad example, of itself. A lesson which should be learned by all multi-ethnic and multi-religious states.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
I can't see you, but you are audible. Yes, sir.
You are not visible.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Tapaswi ji, you are
सुन रहा हूँ,
audible but
सुन
not
रहा.
visible.
Can I ask a question?
जी.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Yes, sir.
Hello. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Let me compliment you for a very insightful analysis of Pakistan historically and the present situation. My question is that given the historical background, given the situation as it exists in Pakistan today, whether it is their problem in Balochistan or in tribal areas or internal situation, political turmoil, economic lowdown and all that. Now, my point is that do you think in the near future any of these factors are going to influence or reduce the influence of the so-called Pakistan establishment? And in this context, I'm referring mainly to the military, which has literally a very dominant influence in determining the policy, foreign policy particularly, and policy with regard to Indian relations. Do you think that in the near future there is a possibility of this stranglehold of the so-called establishment? Because I find that it is one of the major factors which comes in the way of really sort of improving relations with India, the Pakistan military.
Well,
I mean, on a personal note,
Yeah.
sorry for my name is Suresh Mehta, and my nephew Satish Mehta,
yes.
he was a trainee under you when you
Yes,
were
yes.
posted in Paris.
Paris,
He
yes.
often remembers you. At the moment, he is not in Jaipur. Otherwise,
Right.
you would have participated in this excellent talk that you have given. A very insightful and comprehensive talk that you have given.
Thank you. Please convey my regards to him. You see, all these compulsions of Pakistan are influencing their decision making. If the level of terrorism has gone down today, it is largely because of their internal compulsions and other problems that they have created for themselves, including in Afghanistan. So tactically, they have toned down their inimical actions against India for the moment. Pakistan has done it time and again. Pakistan's military dictators. For example, take the example of Zia. Zia-ul Haq, when his western border heated up with Afghan jihad, he launched a charm offensive towards India. It was a false charm offensive, but a charm offensive nonetheless. And then there were a lot of visits, etc., and the relationship continued. But at the same time, he also continued to build a machine to impose 1,000 cuts on India. Musharraf, similarly, very adventurous person before 9/11, but 9/11 imposed certain limitations on him. So similarly, all these compulsions are imposing limitations on Pakistan's ability to carry out its brazen agenda against India, and therefore make a tactical retreat, if I may use that word. This is what Bajwa was talking about when he was talking about, shift from geopolitics to geoeconomics, etc., etc. And I'm not saying we should not make use of this tactical retreat. We should make use of this retreat to manage this relationship better. After all, it's because of Pakistan's compulsion and then our growing compulsion on the Chinese side that restoration of ceasefire came about in February 2021. So we must make use of these compulsions. But I would also say that I don't see any sign of the army changing its central core belief, which is still centered on India. which still regards India as enemy number one, which still thinks of its institutional interest of sustaining the India movement. That change, when it comes about, would indicate a strategic change to us, and that could improve things in a dramatic manner. But that has not come about. But short of that, it's tactical retreat, something which we should make use of.
Tapasri Sharma ji?
Yes, sir. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. You are.
Sir, first of all, I would like to say that I am very enlightened with your briefing, sir. It is a very deep insight, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I would like to know further about just 4 points. Both the country have anti-sentiments with each other. How media plays a vital role in it. Second, can we separate our cultural activity from politics? Thirdly, how younger generation is taking that the approach of relationship between India and Pakistan. Could you please just enlighten us with these brief questions?
Yes, I understood the first one, the role of media. I didn't quite get the second and third. Could someone please help us with this? Because maybe the voice is not clearly audible. Yes.
Sir, may I say something?
Yes.
He is a Tapsri and he was our student. Now is assistant professor in Government College of Rajasthan.
Okay. So media is one. Second is what?
Second, he is asking that how we can separate the cultural and political aspects of relationship. And third, he is asking that what is the views of younger generation, both the countries, to develop the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Well, media, I think, has an important role on both sides, and they have not played that role very well. The Pakistani press, generally follows its establishment. We have a little more discerning press, but I must say, most of the TV channels, etc., and media outlets also generally take a cue from, what the authorities may be thinking. But more important than that, I have nothing against, if they wish to look at what the authorities may be thinking and tune their discussions accordingly. But more importantly, they are indulging in discussions which are ill-informed. All kinds of, misperceptions are being spread. Some Pakistani panelists are called, some Indian panelists. It's a useless discussion. It's a cacophony, which nothing is understood and nobody can follow anything. So media can play a role. I hope that it will play a more responsible role than has been the case on both sides. Cultural, I must say, it gets linked with political. It depends when you have a more stable relationship, when you are managing it well, cultural exchanges take place. But now they haven't taken place for a long time. I wish you could isolate the two from each other, but they willy-nilly get linked. Although, as I say, if we have to pay attention to the people's dimension in Pakistan, all these instrumentalities must continue to be used, which is people-to-people contacts and cultural contacts, etc., etc. Younger generation, I don't know, on the Indian side, I must say that there is a lot of anger in India, justified because of what happened over the years, including post-Mumbai attack. It became more accentuated. So it's difficult for me, generally the Indian younger generation is focused on economic opportunities. And this is what I told a group of editors of a newspaper. I was talking to Dawn editors in a closed door meeting. And I said, listen, in India, people are focused on economic opportunities. And whenever there is an interaction between India and another foreign country, the first thing people say is, what are the economic opportunities that are coming our way from this? And when it comes to Pakistan, all that we hear is Kashmir, security issues, terrorism, etc., etc. And this is 2013 beginning. And I said, a day will come when the Indian middle class will lose interest and they'll say, shut out this country and, somehow let's have nothing to do with it, which cannot be done. But that has influenced the Indian thinking. On the Pakistani side, I must say that whenever I interacted with the younger generation, as I said earlier, older generation was fixated on two-nation theory, etc., etc., Kashmir, Sol, Siachen, etc., etc. Younger generation, when I spoke to them, they always spoke of educational opportunities, more visas, more exchange of films, etc., etc. They were forward-looking. But I must caution here, and I write in my book also, that these were elite educational institutions. I was called only to elite educational institutions. No public university or government college called me. I don't know, the thinking may be a little different there. But I tend to believe that the younger generation, 75 years of existence, some kind of identity has developed in the Pakistani mind. It's not as if it's completely devoid of identity, which was the case in 1947. So the younger generation is not as bothered about two-nation theory, etc., as the older one is. But with that caveat, which I mentioned.
और थैंक यू वेरी मच सरवाल साहब. और कोई अगर है तो we had a very interesting discussion. Banavat ji, आप formally thanks करिए Sabharwal जी को.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Sharat ji. I think all dimensions of the Indo-Pak relations have been covered by you, the people, the establishment, military. And what you have told us, I think it strengthens our thinking that the misperception on both sides are probably the reasons for the type of relations that have been. You didn't mention more, I think maybe sometime later. There's in the initial part of your lecture, you did mention about the LOC getting converted to the international border. Maybe sometime, but the people will have to climb down from their positions on both sides. If that would ever happen or not happen, we can only, and if that, and that could probably put a stop to many of the things that we have discussed. But thanks a lot for giving us this insight into various dimensions and details. And in all response to the questions, also you have mentioned a few things about which some of us are aware, but they need to know more about it. And as you also suggested, that maybe in future the need to understand and the opportunity to understand each the country's thinking and the people-to-people contact might lead to a situation where both can reduce their defense expenditure and then use that money on their other problems in the countries that we have. Thank you a lot, Sharat ji, and thanks to the people who have asked questions. Once again, it was our pleasure to listen to you. And the manner in which you developed the topic and then you said a number of things which was very enlightening. Thanks a lot from all of us here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It was a privilege indeed.